Ladies and gentlemen, ministers, commissioner, ladies and gentlemen, colleagues, guests, dear architects, this is the time when we have gathered here for a dialogue. This is the time when we want to base our thoughts, our deeds on time-tested values. And this is also the time to listen to our partners and to find the right solutions. And this is what I'm saying in the introduction of this conference, because urban planners, architects and designers, just like politicians or high-level EU officials, they are socially responsible persons and they are engaged persons. And of course, in local and global processes, cultural heritage quite often becomes victim and hostage of political or religious or military conflicts. And today in Europe, we are talking about strategic policies for regenerating urban environment and, in a way, about restarting of European cities based on the values that have been time-tested. And heritage is a strategic resource, while also creativity is a very important instrument for development. Therefore, we have to find the right balance between those two in each country. And of course, there are laws, charters, and conventions. However, there is also personal and collective experience, and we can have learned a lot from our mistakes and from our success stories. And during the Latvian presidency, we are holding this conference that is dedicated to heritage, contemporary architecture and design. And here we'll be sharing Latvia's and Riga's vision, as well as hear from our guests, since we are very open to continuously improve. And the first session will be introduced with two very important addresses, followed by two presentations. And we will start with the hosts. And therefore, it is a great pleasure for me to give floor now to an architect who has been heading the Latvian State Inspection for Heritage Protection, and an individual who has created a very advanced legislative package for protection of heritage. Ladies and gentlemen, I give floor to Juris Dambis. Ministers, Commissioner, ladies and gentlemen, dear colleagues, culture is the very basis of the quality of life nowadays, and in a broader sense, it is actually the only instrument for the development of civilization, because the world goes around only due to culture, and we can only evaluate the work of previous generations based on the cultural heritage, because otherwise it would be all lost. And the cultural heritage serves as a collective memory, and it also ensures the quality of life. And as time passes, the cultural heritage increasingly becomes a part of our daily life. It's no longer something exclusive and distant. And in our daily life, we encounter this cultural heritage, and heritage and creativity cannot be separated. The culture and the impact of cultural heritage cannot be measured precisely. And of course, the impact of culture is much greater than we can measure. And can we even measure culture in terms of economic indicators? Because culture exists as a separate entity and cannot be measured by economic indicators. And would culture will be less important if we wouldn't be able to calculate its value. And of course, it constantly changes and replaces the deeds of previous generations. And of course it is exposed not only to natural wear and tear, but also its conservation to a large extent relies on our willingness to conserve it. And 40 years have passed since 1975, which is a turning point in Europe where we changed our understanding and evaluation of the architectural values. And the Architectural Heritage Year in Europe was also a turning point in our understanding to preserve architectural heritage because the industrial approach had already made extensive damage and also, in a way, destroyed the heritage since it didn't match the general concept of a territory. And of course, this philosophy has been developing throughout the years, and in today's understanding, we can say that the cultural heritage is a very broad concept. We are talking about also environmental protection of cultural and historic sites, and not only the aesthetic aspects, but also other factors that work together. And the cultural and historic elements go hand in hand with the natural heritage, and protection of each site should be ensured from a broader perspective. And although we have many international conventions, recommendations, we have resolutions, we hold numerous conferences, and we have many laws, but still the cultural heritage institutions still find themselves in conflicts against the needs of contemporary construction in protected sites. And sometimes when they visit very valuable from cultural point of view sites, sometimes it seems like we are building a catastrophe for future. And in Latvia, for more than 15 years, we have been paying attention to how the cultural heritage interacts with contemporary architecture. And it was in 2000 when we held an international conference where we adopted the Riga Charter on preservation and authenticity of cultural heritage, and it was in 2010 when we held the fourth Baltic Sea region Cultural Heritage Forum when we discussed the contemporary challenges. And as a part of Latvian presidency, the inspection that I represent, in close cooperation with other institutions also from abroad, have organized this interdisciplinary conference among the architects, designers, spatial planners, builders, municipalities, etc., in order to discuss all these very important issues and how the heritage and contemporary architecture interact. And in this conference, we have representatives from 27 countries. Altogether, we have 160 members. And we have discussed these issues also in various working groups. And we have prepared also the different conclusions. And we have so far managed to ensure a very productive atmosphere. And the members were also able to register online, and they were asked to actually provide their feedback. And this means that we are very happy to have a very broad perspectives and different opinions. And so far, everyone has been very willing to contribute, so thank you very much. Of course, people have always wanted to live in high-quality environment that inspires for new ideas and for productive work. And as we look at the history of architecture, we must admit that sometimes distinguished symbols and landmarks replace their predecessors. And of course, we have to stand on guard in order to protect the values that have to be protected. which means that, of course, we still may encounter situations where, in the name of development, sometimes we, the guardians, have to step back to probably make room for even better values. However, of course, a balanced approach should be adopted. And the architects have to be able to establish dialogue with our past, and we must be very cautious about balancing the past and the future. And in each era, the architecture has its own features, and only by ensuring this interaction between different eras, we may develop in a harmony, thusly creating an inspiring environment that we can pass over to the next generations. And, of course, we cannot talk about high-quality architecture if it destroys the values that have been created previously. And, of course, nowadays we should talk about how the past and our heritage can coexist in harmony with new developments. And, therefore, we have to talk about the need for change, the need for new developments. However, in each separate case, we have to also apply analysis, research, in order to achieve a balanced approach. And we must be aware that there are situations where new additions, contemporary additions, are even welcome. However, there are also sites where new developments are more than undesirable, and any additions would distort the harmony and value. And when we talk about preserving the cultural heritage, we are talking about the quality of life. And therefore, we must develop a quality dialogue. We must be ethical, and we must engage in public discussions. And of course, the interaction between cultural heritage and new developments is something that we should treat with respect, and responsible design approaches should add value rather than destroy it. And here we are talking about establishing dialogue where, in the name of improving the quality of life, the specialists of cultural heritage actually encourage new additions to our historic sites. And also designers and architects could be able to say to clients, no, in this case, there is nothing we can do because everything is in harmony. We only should preserve this particular site. And if we compare the cultural heritage with other sectors, we can see that we are no longer talking about a very narrow, very isolated sector, which can be interpreted narrowly, because we are talking about an interdisciplinary phenomena. And at national and also international in the international level, this is the time for us to, in a way, restart the cultural heritage protection. And in order to ensure this protection, we have to have a broader involvement from the society. And the state functions also should be adjusted accordingly. And the society as such should use the modern technologies in order to be efficient in addressing a broader society based on personal experiences, personal emotions, while also treating each target group with a tailor-made approach based on the specifics of each particular case. And the system of protecting the cultural heritage should also endorse and celebrate diversity, because otherwise we are risking to get lost in the bureaucracy. Of course, we have documents, we have databases or softwares. However, we should not lose the very essence. And therefore, we have to look for the most appropriate approaches, because there is no universal approach, and therefore we have to work hard in order to ensure the best possible solution for each particular case, and therefore we have to be ethical, we have to be professional, we have to be tolerant, and focus on the quality of life. And the system of protecting cultural heritage, of course, will be changed also in the future, because the concept of culture is becoming broader and broader, and in today's also design becomes a very integral part of this process. So I wish you all a very productive conference, and I truly look forward to hear from you very interesting ideas, and let us come up with very interesting conclusions. And I truly hope that you all have received a copy of our draft conclusions that we will be working on, and tomorrow in the afternoon we will be able to finalize it. Thank you.
Thanks to my colleague Juris Dambis, and as you remember, I mentioned the highest officials of the European Commission. It is very important that this person has spent many years in a very nice monument of history with very nice steps of Swedish granite, so you understand it is the parliament building of the Hungary. This person has been also the minister and also assistant to Prime Minister. So, ladies and gentlemen, we will give floor to Tibor Navracsics, European Commissioner for Education, Culture, Youth and Sport. The floor is yours.
Ministers, ladies and gentlemen, I'm very pleased to be here with you today to discuss how cultural heritage, contemporary architecture and design can best interact to further improve the quality of Europe's urban landscapes. Riga itself is a wonderful example of how successful this interaction can be. The city's skyline is still dominated by its well-preserved historic center, by the castle, the cathedral and St. Peter's Church. But Riga's skyline is also that of a modern city. It has kept up with successive architectural trends while preserving its authenticity, as we see in the Art Nouveau neighborhood. The events and the celebrations throughout 2014, when Riga was a European capital of culture, demonstrated that the cultural riches of this city are not simply memories of the past, but a rich asset that can serve as a great basis for its future. And as in all cities, but here only occasionally and only if you look very carefully, you can also see a few low-quality interventions that do not respect the scale, the character, the cultural and social fabric of the city. Seeking the right balance between development and conservation is a common European dilemma. How we solve it matters. 80% of the EU population and the greatest part of our Union's economic activity take place in historic cities and towns. Therefore, the quality of the historic urban landscapes we live in contributes decisively to our well-being, but also to our identity as citizens of the EU. To protect and conserve our heritage is primarily a matter for national, regional and local authorities. The European Union has a supporting role in line with the EU treaties and in respect of the principle of subsidiarity. But there is no contradiction between national responsibilities and EU action. Heritage is always both local and European. It's been forged across borders and communities. Heritage is made up of local stories that together make the history of Europe. So it really matters a lot whether we manage to make our cities better places to visit, work, and live in. Success and failure have economic as well as social consequences. In our communication towards an integrated approach to heritage policies of July 2014, the European Commission has acknowledged the need to cope with the many challenges cities are facing today, among them environmental and urbanization pressures. But we also stressed that the preservation of our heritage can and should be a part of the daily life of our communities. Heritage is not a passive inheritance. Its very survival depends on its becoming accessible to all. It hinges on sites becoming centers of knowledge, focal points of creativity and culture, and places where communities interact and social integration takes place. Historic cities and towns face the most complex problems in terms of preserving the fabric of European identity while generating sustainable economic growth and employment. But there are examples, such as Riga, which show that wise heritage management can be successful and sustainable, for example, through reusing historic buildings and in energy-efficient ways, and promoting greener transport and cultural tourism. And very often, it is architecture and design that make the link between preservation and sustainable use, responding to contemporary social needs by giving a new value to the achievements of the past, and ultimately by creating an inspiring environment for present and future generations. In fact, thanks to the attractiveness of their urban and natural environments, heritage sites often host clusters of cutting-edge cultural and creative industries. We need to encourage this trend. We need to stimulate the whole cycle of creation, cultural production, preservation, and interaction with cultural and creative industries. That is why I particularly welcome the fact that this conference takes place during Latvia's Creativity Week and back-to-back with another presidency conference on cultural and creative industry crossovers that focuses on the contribution the cultural and creative sectors can make to the development of the economy, to innovation, and to the well-being of the society. There are many opportunities for member states and stakeholders to work more closely across borders to protect cultural heritage, making the most of EU policies and programs. Let me just add that the €315 billion investment plan the Commission presented in November includes a priority on urban renovation. This could be used to finance interventions in historic cities and towns. The challenge now is to take advantage of these opportunities. And I believe the right way forward is to take a very inclusive approach to managing cultural heritage. We need to turn local interest into local involvement and local involvement into local action. There is a wealth of good practices across Europe from which we can learn. The new work plan on culture from the period 2015-2018 includes heritage as one of the 4 priorities for this period. It proposes 2 sub-themes on heritage policies: participatory governance for cultural heritage and heritage skills, training and knowledge transfer. And we are just about to convene working groups on both of these subjects, involving experts as well as civil society. Ladies and gentlemen, the skyline of Riga is like the skyline of Europe. It is ancient and modern at the same time. It is firmly rooted in the city's glorious past, but from that solid basis, it opens up towards the future. It invites us to look more carefully into how we can better protect our cultural riches, and it gives us many reasons to look at the future with confidence. I wish all of us many inspiring discussions. Thank you very much.
Dāmas un kungi,
Ladies and gentlemen, thanks to Commissioner. And now we would switch to our work session, and I will invite a representative from RUNDALE's Palace, Jānis, and my colleague Andris Kronbergs here in front, and we will start with our plenary session.
Dāmas un kungi, vārds Jānai Druviņai, RUNDāLE.
Ladies and gentlemen, so you will hear about Imants Lancmanis later, but Jāna Druviņa is here from RUNDALE's Palace, and she will tell us about it. Ladies and gentlemen, participants of this conference, dear colleagues, most probably you hope to see the director of RUNDALE's Palace Museum. Unfortunately, he's not in Latvia right now, and therefore I'm here instead of him, and I'm representing his voice here. I'm very glad to address you here on behalf of Imants Lancmanis and on behalf of the whole museum. I will try to show you and tell about the renovation of RUNDALE Palace, and I will try to tell everything what Jānis, what Imants Lancmanis would have told you. So RUNDALE's Palace is the summer residence of Duke of Kurland, Ernest John Johan Biron, and it has been built from 1736 until 1740, and it has been designed by architect Francesco Bartolomeo Rastrelli, directly under his guidance, and most of the palace interior decorations have been retained. It has not been renewed and rebuilt during the following years. Palace has suffered different damages, and especially damages during wars in 1812, 1919, and after World War II. Actually, everything has been, all these damages have been such that the substance of this monument has been retained. Latvian cultural heritage has lost many different buildings and figures you can see here on the screen, but the RUNDALE Palace should be perceived as the best preserved monument in Latvia since those medieval times. And here it is a map of Latvia where this we can see the location of RUNDALE Palace. It is there where this red dot is. The concept of restoration of RUNDALE Palace was started in 1964, around the time when a Venetian Charter was adopted, and this charter adopted the principles for renovation of different monuments, and we have observed this charter during renovation of this palace when museum was looking for possibilities to restore the palace. And on the one hand, the Venetian Charter provided this principally right positions that shouldn't improve authenticity of the palace, but on the other hand, Venetian Charter includes also such sentences that reflect the understanding of architecture of those years, and this was also adopted when renovating different monuments. Article 9 of the Charter says that if it is necessary to apply new details they should depend on historical compositions and should also provide the features of that era. Actually, in Europe, this created different examples of architecture when wood, glass, and metal became details that had to show this match of two eras or 2 centuries. But in case of RUNDÄLE Palace, we defined the basic task to retain authentic substance and to perform restoration and supplement missing details, not showing these visible differences between the original and the additional details. Another opinion when RUNDÄLE's Palace was renovated was its place in a Latvian cultural heritage. This was the only possibility in Latvia to show the residency of a duke from the 18th century and to show as it was initially built, also by supplementing and renovating all the details, all interiors, and all the items of art. So experts of the sector drafted a concept which provided for restoration of this palace and to retain the uniformity of this. And it was a task to try to not to include all these topical details of that time, and additionally it was a wish to show the visitors of that to show to the visitors the presence of this of the dukes of their atmosphere, and therefore all these new details were not introduced. And we also there was also a problem about the several layers in different layers of different centuries, and in case of exterior of the palace, we saw different amendments which had been introduced in later centuries, and these stairs had been made due to practical aspects, and they were actually of very poor condition. These all were replaced with staircases according to the initial design of the architecture. The facades of the RUNDÄLE Palace had retained the original layer of plastering, except some places and some damages during World War II. And during 2008 and 2009, all these additional layers were removed, and facades were renovated by using respective materials, which were using lime mortar and removing this cement. Special casing was gardener's house and its renovation, which was performed very consequently, part of the wall after conservation and restoration of lime mortar, and on the original paint layer was applied. So this was all preserved and restored as it was as it should be initially. And if we speak about interiors of RUNDÄLE Palace, about works of interior, they were started in 1972 and were completed last year, 2014. Since a long process was related with renovating and with the fact that these works were very complicated. So it was 7 ceiling paintings and 2 paintings on walls. It was it lasted for several years, and so it means that each room of each premise of the palace had to be renovated during the 5-6 years. And there were different details which were missing, which were renovated, were elements which had to be renowned. And here we have to mention Article 12 of an initial charter, that these missing or lost details should be related with the whole monument, but at the same time they should differ from the original, so not to say that these are originals. So therefore, we all understand that this is not suitable for Baroque buildings, when it is very important to show these pieces of art as one piece. And if it is not, if it is clear that we cannot add some new details or new elements to such a painting, we cannot make such a uniform painting, and therefore we were using different methods to improve the situation.
We tried to match the original style of the paintings, and we also documented the whole process. And here we can see an example of a painting and how it was restored. Here we can see a fragment before conservation, and you will also see the next stages, and here you can see the final work. And as we reconstruct the lost details, it was very important to document the process accordingly. And if we talk about the details of these ornaments, of course, it was only possible when the motif was symmetrical, or in a way could be reconstructed without voluntary interfering with the original. If the documentation was missing, we were not able to renovate these elements. And just like you can see here in the bedroom of the Duke, where in the lower part we can see a medallion, half of which has been lost and has not been renovated. Of course, the very high standards were included regarding the documentation, which included taking photographs as well as various blueprints. Just like here, you can see the ceiling painting, where you can see what kind of damages have been inflicted on this particular part, and here you can also see how the damages have been evaluated, and here you can see the final form. Also, the stucco moldings, at least some of them had been there. Some of them were mechanically damaged. They suffered from leaking roofs, but later on they were cleaned and conserved, and also the moldings were renovated in order to achieve the original intention. Yes, here you can see some more rooms. You can see the White Room in 1949. At that time it was used as to store grain. And here you can also see very damaged decorations on the ceilings. And here you can see the final form of the same room. And similarly, we can also look at the Rose Room before the restoration, and here you can see how it looks afterwards. And what concerns the stucco moldings, it was in 1812 when many moldings were damaged along the windows. However, we managed to renovate them because we still had the original drawings of these molds, and therefore based on analogies also in other parts of the palace, we were able to restore them. And in many cases, we removed different layers to reach the original layer, and only worked on the places where the painting was dislodged. And also, the golden plating was renovated, and we do our best to achieve the effect or the original intention. Likewise, we try to retain also the wooden parts of interior. Here you can see a part of the Duke's bedroom, how the parquet looked at that time, but also this parquet we did manage to restore. And what concerns the wooden panels, then it was the alcove panels in the bedroom that suffered most. And here you can see in an old photo how they looked at that time. And partially they were destroyed in 1919. And however, based on the photographs that we had, we were able to reconstruct these wooden panels. And in the 18th century, there were also tile stoves installed throughout the palace. And as we started the restoration, there were only 3 of these stoves left. Here you can see one of them in the Duke's bedroom. Now, altogether, we have 8 original stoves in the palace. We managed to retrieve them from different museums before they were moved there in 1930s. And at that time, it was in Leningrad and now St. Petersburg, where we also prepared 17 copies of the original stoves. And throughout the palace, the wallpaper was severely damaged, destroyed already in 1812, excuse me. However, what concerns the patterns and the colors and also manufacturers, which were in Berlin, helped us actually to order and replicas. And altogether, this process took us 19 years to restore these wallpapers. And as we worked with this renovation, we also have a very ambitious task, not only to restore this monument, but also to revitalize it in a way to restore its functionality as well. And therefore, these rooms not only act as a set of perfectly restored rooms, but we also try to convey the functional idea behind each room. So also all the lighting, all the decorations have been restored to how we perceive the 18th century tradition and also the taste of the Duke of Kurland. And this Venice Charter, in a way, says that when the authentic structure is lost, we are switching to contemporary solutions. However, in the case of RUNDÄLE Palace, we made a different approach in this case, and namely, we based our idea on the fact that it is an independent structure, and we must ensure that our visitors are kept within the walls of the 18th century, or 19th century rather, throughout the palace, which also includes corridors, also administrative offices, as well as restrooms. So we tried to harmonize the interior throughout the building. And even the furniture that we used in our offices, we tried to somehow align them. and also other items that we use on our daily work. We try to, in a way, align them to the general stylistics. And in our museum, we do not use halogen bulbs because it would be a swift change from the 18th century to 21st. The only example is the souvenir kiosks and the restrooms. At the same time, we have installed some digital monitors and information stands. So the same approach has been also applied to our exhibition halls, and we have this permanent exhibit and entitled From Gothic to Art Nouveau. And unlike in many other cases where museums install halogen lighting and the glass displays, in RUNDÄLE Palace we tried to find, in a way, a harmony between what we want to show our visitors and how it goes together with general interior. And you can see that the lights are quite mellow in all these premises. And what concerns the short-term exhibits, also here we apply different principles. For example, it was in 1997 dedicated to the portrait arts in Latvia. We try to supplement it with furniture from the 18th century. And then we also had an exhibit entitled The Rose, What is a Rose? We tried also to create an environment that would emphasize the symbolic meaning of rose. And of course, another inseparable part is the Baroque garden of the palace. And of course, we put a great emphasis on the restoration of the garden, and unlike in many other gardens, and it was in the 19th century when this Rastrelli garden was not turned into so-called English garden-type park. So we restored the original places where the trees were planted, and therefore, in a way, we have maintained very precisely the initial idea of Rastrelli. And here you can see the original plans of Rastrelli. But of course, throughout the 20th century, given also the impact of the two world wars, of course, these gardens were very unkept. And as we started to renovate the garden, we removed the outgrown trees. Here you can see the picture from 1977. And here you can also see that all the alleys are still there. And here you can see how it looks nowadays. And also here you can see the bird view on the garden and the whole ensemble. And here you can see the central alley, where you can see overgrown lime trees. And here you can see how they look today. And so we also introduced the fourth generation growth, which was a technical matter rather than methodological matter. And of course, it was we also exchanged the hedges, and also here you can see the Holland lime trees that were planted here in the central alley. And in addition to the Baroque garden, here you can see the Green Theater, which has been made here. And as you can see here, one part creates an amphitheater, and which narrows down as it moves forward. And Rastrelli also had an idea of pavilions. Unfortunately, they were never introduced, but instead we have introduced a summer cafe as well as a public restroom. And we also have introduced a rose garden, which altogether has more than 2,000 different sorts of roses. But also this rose garden is based on the original intention of the Duke to have such a rose garden. And the whole ensemble also includes a pub created around 1800s, and it also includes a dairy plant. Part of these buildings do not belong to the museum and have not been renovated so far. And in the conclusion, I must say that generally speaking, the RUNDÄLE Palace and its surroundings has been renovated in a manner that tries to maintain the harmony and the general style that corresponds to the era of its creation. So thank you very much for your attention. And I truly hope that you would be happy to also ask your questions, especially during tonight's visit. And of course, it is an unfortunate situation that Mr. Lancmanis will not be possible to do so. However, in the evening, I will be happy to have you and to have your questions during our visit to RUNDÄLE Palace. So you will see it also how it looks in reality. So see you in the evening in the RUNDÄLE Palace.
Paldies, Jānai Druviņai.
Thanks to Jānis Druviņa for the very interesting story, and I do hope that our foreign guests understood that we have lived half a century with the restoration process of RUNDÄLE Palace, and we are really pleased that we have managed to restore this palace, and it takes the significant place among all other palaces in Europe. And now we have come back to modern times, and I have my colleague Andris Kronbergs, architect, who established his office already before regaining independence, and he has been one of the leading architects of Latvia, and his name, together with Mr. Birkets, has been included in history of architecture of Latvia. So the floor is yours. Ministers, colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, I'm very pleased to be here in this conference and tell about some of experiences of our office during these years. I have chosen 4 examples, 4 precedents of coexistence, which are related to coexistence. I named my presentation like that: 4 coexistence precedents. I would like to speak about coexistence of modern and historical environment and buildings. And of course, in any of the activities which we perform, when we perform something in the environment where we have history, we have also a vision of future, and I'm going to tell you, it seems that nothing is actually, we really love sun, but here we cannot see anything, so it makes us blind. Can you see anything? Maybe you should move to this part of the hall. I know that on that screen on the right side you can't see anything. Actually, I feel rather pity because you won't be able to see anything. I have sketches and designs here, but you won't be able to see. So I will have 4 themes. So the first will be about reconstruction of very historically valuable buildings. Actually, it is possible to add some new substances. So the first will be historically valuable building reconstruction. Another will be about new buildings in historic environment, which always is very controversial issue, very difficult task for architects. The third will be about reconstruction of last century buildings. So, for instance, we have these modernism buildings or Soviet time buildings which need to be reconstructed. And then the next will be about natural environment and the architecture. And actually we have to take it very seriously. So natural environment is as significant as our historic heritage. So the first will be about this reconstruction of historically valuable buildings. Speaking about the design, we can say that this is really the question of accessibility. So when renovating these historical buildings and adjusting them to nowadays requirements, of course we make them accessible. Rather often they are not accessible and they become accessible. And this thesis which I have put here on the screen, I wanted to say that also in such cases the presence of modern part is possible. The question is about proportions, about possibility and ability to merge these two, to combine these two things together. And I think that new elements have the right to be present in historical buildings. And you will see one example here. These three buildings, they didn't meet any requirements of their owners. They were almost ruined. For 20 years they were not maintained, they were not used. So these three storehouses at 13, 15 and 17 Miesnieku Street. But what I would like to stress here, when you start work with such buildings, you have to examine them very carefully. And very often you can see that in one and the same building you have substances starting from the 14th century up to 20th century, and all these centuries are there and they are present in one, second or third expression. And so it is very important to evaluate, to understand what to retain and what to change and what to adapt. Here you see the part which has been built in 20th century, in 90s from concrete and reinforced concrete. They have started to renovate this building, and it has been, the process has been stopped. And we got also such, so next to the items of 13th century, we got something also from 1990s, and everything that is merged together. And this building was not completed, and this facade I would like to show, especially because this facade didn't exist, and you will see what is our proposal for making this facade. The second building was even in a worse condition, so also again starting from the 15th century, the different substances, and when we examined the facade, we saw that we have three eras there on the facade. So you have interior paintings, and so this examination is very important. And the third building, which was again storehouse with very low ceiling, and we always have a question, what can I do with such a building? If you wish to live there, to introduce living function, this is really very difficult. And during construction, it is very important to perform archaeology here. And here we haven't completed this building yet, but we have performed it here, and we got much knowledge about this area starting from the 13th century. And here several sketches, designs of possible life of this building, and that red jot and square. So we see that you can go through here. So one of these storehouses will become a passage through which people would be able to walk, and one part which refers to the church, to the yard of church, we wish to offer this as space for public usage. The building will be a multifunctional building. The first on the first floor we'll have public functions, and the second and the upper floors will have living functions. But actually this is rather difficult. So this is very close to the church. It is a complex. So currently we are making everything's in the process after careful examination. Most probably this will look like that. It will be renovated completely. In its historical appearance, and here in the middle of the building you'll see this idea to show all three centuries, all three eras. So it will be a story about the history of that building. So these are rather precisely restored parts, and here you see the backyard, which we where we are offering a very modern facade. So it didn't exist in real life, and so we offered such a very different appearance by applying modern technologies and possibilities to participate in the further life of the building. So several interior pictures showing that it is possible to use and to combine these functions in the buildings, which actually, according to widths and heights, are not almost not adjustable to the functions as they would like to be. So and here we have removed some slabs, making two-story high buildings premises, so to have a new space. This was about historical buildings. But the most controversial always is the topic about new buildings in historical environment. And here one thesis that when placing a new building in a historic environment, when we have such a reason, then we need some key to open the door and to have this grounding why we should make it like that and what we should do there. But at the same time, I would like to say that formation of replicas doesn't provide us opportunity to create a building reflecting that era, that particular era. So by trying to find something, we cannot duplicate the previous eras. We have to make something more modern. So that is one very important theme. And here one small picture, rather old project. I think that you have seen this, but today. But so when we were making this old Gertrude church is the main element in that place, and that tower and all surroundings actually play together. But the previous architects, as you see, have not been very careful. They have been wanted to erect their own towers, smaller or larger towers, so and their attitude differs. But so our attitude was that we have to obey this scale and we have to be tolerant towards that church, and that was the main motive when working. And this corner has been taken away slightly, and the building was made as an ordinary building without any influence on this specific place. That was our approach. Of course, also this project was discussed a lot, and so not everybody was happy with these materials that were used here. But even more controversial is one more object which has not been built yet. And about these principles, I would like to tell you in my future slides. This is a new hotel. We are designing this. it will be in Old Riga, in this place. So here we have planned a building according to special planning. So right now this is an empty space, and we are designing here in this red square site. We are planning for a hotel, and also neighboring sites are empty and nothing is being planned for now. And actually the situation is difficult because in that area of Old Riga you see different buildings. So we have Mercendorf's house, and so different houses with different architectural historic styles. So we see the so-called Soviet Baroque, so 1950s, and we also see here Stalin's architecture, which is now the building of Technical University right now, and also more modern buildings, for instance, school. We have very authentic building of Occupation Museum, which is a monument of modern architecture. Also different replicas reconstructed, for instance, Blackhead's house. These are classical reconstructions where nothing was left. And there are also some trials to make buildings in historic style. All this is around that place where we are planning. So this city council building and so others. So all these buildings and all this environment makes us think that possibly we also have the right and possibility to make a rather modern building, and even older history, and more. So we see that this place has been with many buildings, so with narrow streets, as it is planned also in this special development plan. And the question is, are we renovating this spatial proportions as well? And this is one of the questions which we are trying to solve. This is the picture after war. So it was bombarded during the war, and we have to make a building here.
And if you have an empty land plot, here you can still see some post-war photographs. You can see that the St. Peter's Church is without its tower. You can see the place where now we have the Occupation Museum. You can see the construction of the Blackhead's house. So the territory is quite diverse also from the historic point of view and from what it looked like before the war. And there was a competition announced for building up this site. And of course, we have to have some basic principles based on which we could come up with our proposals. And here we found a historic basement, which is now underground. We still know that about the geometric properties of this basement, and based on these sketches, we came up with this mesh based on the historic proportions. And based on these, we tried to transfer them into three-dimensional modern architecture. So this is the idea with which we participated in the competition. And in a way, we have transferred this historic heritage into the modern understanding of architecture. So currently we are working on the design, since this building will serve as a hotel, and all the parameters will of course meet the building standards. And one of the questions that is still open is, which also coincides with the Riga city urban planning principles. So here we try to keep up with the traditional heights and width, so to in order to maintain the traditional proportions in the old town. So here you can see that our proposal practically mimics what was there before the war, because also at that time there was a building. So here we have played with several ideas how to fill in this mesh. And when we studied the history of the building that was there, we learned that there was a publishing house. Then at one time it was a records shop. So in each room there was a different business at some time. So our idea was to, in a way, also make a puzzle of different shapes to fill in this framework. And in a way, this is our way of interpreting the very rich history of this area, and this is how we see the future of this building. So we are still working on this design, and of course such projects are quite sophisticated. If we do not want to mimic something, then of course it's quite difficult to come up with new viable ideas. And as I mentioned before, another topic that I would like to cover is the reconstruction of last century buildings. And also in this area, it's very important to draw a line somewhere. I know that many of you stay at Hotel Albert at the Dzirnavu Street. And of course, what we do today is quite different from how we worked some 25 years ago. So in this way, here we can see this warped shape, which is an extreme representation of how our approaches have changed. Here you can see an industrial site that has been turned into a modern publishing house for a newspaper, while trying to also build upon the historic features. And here we can see also glass walls on the northern side. Of course, this is one of the ways how to do it. The possibilities are there. And here we can see that the designers have played with various shapes, in a way robust shapes. However, it's also very important to think about functionality of these premises, since here we are talking about a newspaper. So different approaches can be employed. And reconstruction of newer buildings in a way is another niche in our construction sector that is steadily growing, and it is clear that also modern buildings at one point will require some rebuilding in order to add value and to keep up with modern times. And I think that the most important issue is how the natural environment interacts with architecture and with us as individuals, especially in culturally and historically important sites, such as, for example, the banks of River Daugava, especially upstream in the rural areas. Here you can see an example of such an area. And of course, our attitudes are still quite controversial, both at political and technical level. And of course, we must act responsibly whenever we are dealing with such natural treasures. And here, in one case, there was a project or an idea to build a factory near River Daugava, and the idea here was, and here you can see some sketches, so the idea was to, in a way, merge it with the natural environment, leaving as little impact as possible. Here you can see some examples of ideas how this building could be submerged in a small hill, and in a way, it is one of the ways how to say that here the nature is well above everything else in terms of hierarchy and in terms of our perception of beauty, and also in terms of our attitude towards the natural treasures. Because we have to achieve a healthy balance between what we want to build and what we want to conserve as natural treasures. So this was one example. Here you can see a picture from my own small project, where you can see a small spring running from the ground, and this is this place is very close to my heart, and this is why I try to improve it. And here you can see to have a growing building above the spring is the best you can do. So thank you very much for your attention. So, ladies and gentlemen, we heard about the Palace of RUNDÄLE. We heard from Andris Kronbergs and his projects, and quite very interesting approaches to buildings in historical areas. Please feel free to ask questions to both of the speakers regarding the RUNDÄLE Palace as well as the architectural practice of ARHIS. Unfortunately, Commissioner has left the building, but we still have a couple of ministers, so we also have Professor Gerkan and other distinguished guests. So we have the microphone, so please, if you have some immediate questions, please, the floor is yours. On the other hand, we will have a coffee break right away, and we will resume our work at 4:30. So probably during the coffee break we will think about how to dim the bright sun, otherwise we will not be able to see the presentations. So probably we should turn to the coffee break if we don't have any immediate questions or announcements or otherwise. So if you don't have any, we can turn to coffee break. So thanks to all the speakers. Let us enjoy the coffee. Let us meet 4:30 for the next session.
Good afternoon and welcome back for the final session today. I'm anxious to get you started because if I don't get you started in time, you won't be in time to go to dinner. So, and you wouldn't want that, would you? Right, I'm Christopher Young. I come from the UK. These days I'm a consultant and I've been asked to chair this session. And I was asked to begin with one or two comments on what I think we're trying to talk about today. And I've left my notes. Right. Our next two speakers in the session are Professor Gerkan and then my colleague Alexandra Warr, my former colleague Alexandra Warr. She still works for English Heritage, I don't, who are going to talk about change in the historic environment in different ways. And I think the key to this session, and indeed to much of this conference, is the extent to which management of the historic environment is management of change. Could I have the first slide, please? Sorry? Could I have the slides? Thank you. Thank you. Historic environment is all around us. This is one extreme in Iceland, the Icelandic Parliament site, Tingvellir, and the next one, if I'm pressing the right button, is a totally different type of historic environment, the World Heritage Site of Blaenavon, which is about iron, coal and steel production. So you go from beautiful countryside to gritty post-industrialism. But if the historic environment is everywhere, it has to be used for the benefit of today and tomorrow. And this means change. And I just wanted to show you 2-3 slides of, this is a collegiate school in Oxford. I happen to live there because my wife works there. It's been a school on this site since the 1870s. These are the original buildings. They're still used for the original function. But in order to go on being used for the original function, with 10 times as many pupils, they've had to adapt and extend. So you can see you have the original Victorian concept in the middle, the quad with the buildings around it, and then around that you have buildings of different periods, including the ugly at the back, the classroom block with the flat roof, some in keeping, some not in keeping with the style of the original, but all intended to maintain the original function. This is the latest one, which is a biology laboratory, which has gone for frankly a modernistic approach as opposed to anything that looks Victorian, because it's performing a different function. And another approach that you can see there is the left-hand half of that building was a swimming pool and is now a theatre, and the right-hand half is new construction in order to work with it to provide the rest of the facilities the theatre needs. The point is that in order to go on using the heritage, change has been necessary to adapt it for modern use. Change varies enormously, and one of the key issues for at least the last 20 years has been how we manage that change in the historic environment. How do you put new buildings or adapt old buildings to new uses? And particularly what is appropriate in urban areas. So, for example, we've had things like the UNESCO initiative on historic urban landscapes. So I'm going to finish. We've seen these already just before tea. This is in Riga, and I think this slide and the next one show a variety of different approaches to the historic environment. You have the statues of the Soviet riflemen. You have the museum originally built as a memorial to depict the history of the Soviet riflemen, and then turned round through 180 degrees into the Museum of Occupation, one of the most powerful museum displays I know, in fact. And then you have the frankly pastiche with the reconstruction of the House of Blackheads. And you can see on that same slide a variety of other approaches to rebuilding around the square. I'm not saying that they're right or wrong, I'm just saying there are numerous different approaches, and how you choose what approach is significant as right will depend very much on the site. And I'm looking forward to our next two speakers who are going to give us examples and context for that. And so it's my great pleasure now to introduce Professor Gerkan, long-established architect, born in Riga, who is going to talk, I've looked at the window so I can't read it, going to talk to the title, My Contemporary Architecture in the Tradition of My Native Town, Riga. Professor Gerkan.
Thank you very much for the introduction, Mr. Young. Ladies and gentlemen, I must say that I feel myself a little bit uncomfortable, not due to the wonderful sunshine. I like the sunshine because we have so seldom sunshine in our hometown in Hamburg, in North Germany. But consequences of it, in combination with what we do here, it is a small problem. It is a special problem because I prepared together with Mr. Kuhn for this lecture very high quality pictures, much better than my comments. And the comments are in the hands of the translators, but this is in the hand of the sun or of the weather condition. And I even have to mention that the special title of my lesson has something to do with my life. I have been born in Riga 18 years and 2 months ago from now. I lived the first 3 years in Riga, and then I had to leave with my parents according to the pact between Hitler and Stalin to Germany, and I haven't been here again until the period of Gorbachev. So it was a very, very long time. And what happened later on and how I was in the meanwhile, in the last 15 years, more than 100 times here and had the opportunity to design modern architecture and to realize it here in Riga and to show it to you, to this title, Contemporary Architecture in the Tradition of My Native Town, because I feel some respect to act and to react to the circumstances, to the tradition, to the past of the history of even if it is only a part of Europe. But it is a little bit different part to the main Europe, especially to Germany. What have I to do? So, 14 years ago, I have been already in this building for 3 weeks in this building because I organized at that time workshop with Latvian and German young architects and students to find out some ideas what with Riga, which was at that time a little bit sleeping in the in the bed of the communism before. What can happen in the future? And we presented it in this building. There were many, many hundred people from all over Riga and Latvia together with us. And I remember this, Mr. Dambis was with us, and my very best friend, Leons Jakrins, invited us for an excellent buffet. All of us, more than 200 or 300 people altogether. So, with this very good cook, he is Matthias. What is his second name? The cooker from? You don't know? Diggins. Yes, he's still there. And it is a very, very excellent restaurant. Oh. Only to have a remembership to that time when I lived here as a young boy together with my parents. I have no brothers, no sisters. Until my 4th year, when we had to leave from here, my father went to the front, fighting against the Russians, and my mother went with me to Poland. It was occupied by Germany, and we stayed there for 4 years, but my father died at the front in the meanwhile. I have no intensive remembership to that time, only those small photos we took with us as refugees give me an impression. That is my cousin beside me. I think she is it. And there we are with our 2 mothers in the forest in Jomala. It was very difficult to find my house where I have been born, because not in my passport, not in my church registration, the address was announced, but Leon Jakrins found out that this building must be that one I have been born. It is in a very bad situation nowadays. But besides this, we had a small wooden house in Jomala where we spent summertime. So much to that time, 80 years back from now. And because I intend to give an impression what is the difference between contemporary architecture for an architect, as our office does this work all over the world. We have realized more than 380 projects around the world, in every country, in every part of the world, in Asia, in the meanwhile, fast as much as in Europe. I show first of you what the dimension, what the totally difference in the fondness to design those function projects as this airport in Hamburg, which is done in 3 steps and is operating since more than 12 years in the meanwhile. There you have a view into the inside where we started this morning to come to Riga. And I make a big step to another part of the world, around the world, to a new city in China. It is Lingang city for 1.3 million people, which is under construction. In the meanwhile, there are still living 200,000 people. What you see here is the structure of this city with an artificial lake in the center of a diameter from 3 kilometers, and the surrounding are 10 kilometers. And we work at it since 8-9 years in the meanwhile, and we still go on to do some more. And one of the, this is an ideal situation we hope we could realize around this lake. The city is only 64 kilometers away from Shanghai, and in the meanwhile it is a holiday way out every weekend for the people from Shanghai, and I think it would be a very attractive location in this huge country, China. And we also realize a landmark in this city. It is a maritime museum, the largest maritime museum which has been realized in the world, because the reason to create this city is the creation of a harbor 32 kilometers offshore, the largest harbor of the world, which is nowadays nearly half finished. And in this museum they show what shipping has, what kind of importance shipping has for Asia, especially even for the ancient China governments. It is a very extraordinary building. What you see there on top of the roof are people working there. It is 75 meters in height. These two volumes which show blowing sails of a junker, a Chinese ship, as a symbol for the city. And also in Europe we have a lot of huge projects. The nearest to Riga is this stadium in Warsaw, where the European Championship took place, and you might know it. So I have shown this only to give you an impression what the differences between grand projects on one side are in comparison to those efforts we had to fulfill here in Riga. What we found when I came to the Gorbachev time as a visitor together with my wife to look for my native home, but I didn't find it at that time, was still this heritage remembers from the past in Jomala, these wooden houses on one side, very impressive and very extraordinary, very important, especially for this part of Europe in the northeast, and it was very interesting for people from all over the world who came to Latvia, who came to the Riga Strand to look at those famous buildings. And on the other hand, the Art Nouveau architecture, especially from Eisenstein in the Elizabeth Street here, are the aim to look at the heritage value of Rigan architecture in the city, as well as in Jomala to the seaside. And these are the leading for what an architect who has to realize projects under totally different conditions, under totally another technique and another financial and economic and social and all these circumstances, only to give you an idea that this is totally different to what happened anywhere else. You know those buildings, they should only bring into your mind what is on the other side, on the heritage side of Riga, and now I will try to explain to you what we did here in the last 15 years. I have to mention this before, because somebody who were visitors to Riga 20 or 15 years ago, they said, oh, they renew their old houses, and there is already the Schwarzhopter house, it's a German name, you know, and there were a lot of people very proud on this. I visited this together with some partners of mine, and we were a little bit disappointed, because that is not the original. I think the theme of your event today, the discussion has to do with this problem. With the problem if we could ancient heritage architecture elements renew by renewal by a remake. I won't discuss it anymore. I will only comment that this is not my intention. My intention was and is still to find out what the specialties of the heritage elements of the past architecture are, and to transform them, to bring them in a new Erscheinung. Ich weiß nicht, kommt nicht auf das englische Wort. But not to copy them. And how we did it, I'll try to show you now. First, we remarked when I came first time by invitation of Leon Jakrens. I mentioned his name already, together with her wife, Gunnar. They are my best friends here in Riga. We cooperate since 15 years in the meanwhile. We did nearly every project together. He is an all-round man. I cannot tell too much about him because it will take all the time. He sells most expensive cars and most expensive ships and most expensive housing and he also got the commission from the richest banker at that time. It was Mr. Krasovitsky, and we got the commission as architect to build for him not only a villa, no, at least Krasovitsky village. It was about 10 different houses. I will show you them. And they are in relation to this tradition, building wooden houses in Jomala. I came to that later on. First, I have to remark by the side that those buildings which were realized during the communist period and later on are more or less not very remarkable. Perhaps this building we see here might be one of the best because it is influenced by the Russian style, Russian occupied all the eastern part of the world with their architectural own style. This is Leon Jakens beside me. We get friends, we have done many things together with each other, and I just phoned him and asked him, why are you not here? I will say a hallelujah for you. But he isn't willing. I will see him tomorrow. We work together to find ideas and to create projects. And the first one was a very, very small one. I have to, oh, nothing to be seen. Sorry. Yeah. There is a, I can't find it here. Jetzt ist ja heller als je zuvor hier. Hast du sie? Nein, auch nicht. It's inside the city, a very small corner in the Zauber Street, and this corner wasn't not occupied by a house. Why? Because there was standing a tree, and nobody was willing to touch the tree. And we don't touch the tree, but we built a house beside, and both exist beside each other. I cannot show you because the sun is against it. Let me see. Yeah, yes, here you can see it. This is a house, and there's a tree. It is a very normal house with about 6-8 different apartments, with a circle round staircase in the center, with this facade structure. Here you can even see the tree to the left hand, and here you have a view into their own apartment where they both were living for a while, but might be they still live there, I don't know exactly. So that was the first. Sorry. And that's the backside, a very small courtyard, some parking places, and that is the sunny side of the place, so there are the balconies and the open space of the house. It's not functioning. No. What's that? Ah! That's what you have already seen before, during in the interruptions of the other lectures you heard before. That is the project for the citadel. That is a very, very specific. It's terrible. You couldn't see it. You know in your head. Sorry. It's just the market hall, you know them? Yes, of course, they are here. 4 of these halls, and here, there is a situation where the Citadel project was realized. What was there before? There was this high-rise building, and beside a 3-floor height parking house. In the very best situation of Riga, near to the Daugava, a wonderful situation, but there are cars in. Lancmanis and some others discussed with me, what can we do? We cannot remove the parking house, but it is a pity that this place is not used by any kind of, for instance, an official using or whatever. And so we tried and we reached the permission to realize on top of the park house, it is still existing, a bank house. And in the dialogue, oh my dear, between these 4 parts of the market on one side, we found out to even to create 3 wie kann man das nennen? Bögen? Arcades or arcs across of the parking house. So that was the first idea. We found on the official side intelligent people who said that's an interesting idea. It's a little bit unusual, but 4 different houses, how should it be organized? There were a lot of problems, but we all solved them, and we realized what you can see here. This is a high-rise building in the background. These are the 4 parts with an entrance in between. Here, but they are all together. They are connected to each other. And at that time, nobody knows how many parties would go in. Could be 2, 3, 4, 8, 10, but at least what's the name of the bank? Parex Bank rented totally, and they went in and they created their main government of their bank, and they are still in there, but they had also some problems with the commercial situation. I don't know. I have heard something about it. But I have to explain some ideas of the designing for the facade. You could see lamellars in front of the facade, 2 stories high each, and in different colors. And that was the idea. We fixed it to explain what this reaction should say. It should be a reaction on the natural surrounding of the Riga era, and show the different colors and the colorful situation in the city. So here you can see again how it is constructed. This is the existing park house in the background, and this is a new part, and it's overcrowded there. This is a park house inside, and these are the arcs crossing the main building, and the cars could go through here. We took in our mind the impression of this colorful picture of the city seen from the bird's view. They are mixing many different colors of a special sector, and we try to take them and to put them into this experience of the building. The colors didn't come out because the sun is against it now. And this is a picture which a photographer from us who was sailing along the Daugava took it from his ship, and he said, "Oh, we found out that the same color here is used in some parts of the new building." In the meanwhile, they have only one main entrance, and it is organized as a unique commercial bank building. That's what you have seen before already, oftentimes. It is part of the view from the city across the river Daugava. And now it is, I think so, become a harmonic part of the silhouette the city is showing to the riverside. On our way, we had to take from Riga to the airport. We always went with a driver from Jānis along the street, and we had to get the impression of those very extraordinary high-rise buildings, which doesn't make any consensual relationship to the city. They are very seldom. They are not in a good harmony to Riga itself, in my opinion. Even this, or whatever happens along the street, is, even from the aspect of the dimension of the scale, not in a good relation to the heritage, to that what is specific for Riga's character. And the most exciting and most extraordinary is that I always must shut my eyes if I cross this point. How could this happen? Huh? Unbelievable. It is the entrance to Jomala. It's still there from the very first beginning, since 15 years. However, but those houses got removed one after another. It is a pity, but some of them are still existing. And when we operated there for new houses, apartment houses for instance, we tried to get into a dialogue with a character which is created by the heritage structure of Jomala. This is a big apartment house, the largest we have done at all, with 9 different apartments, very comfortable, near to the beach of the Baltic Sea. Some used to the inside. Some of the parts are double stories with integration of the trees and the nature around. View into the bathroom, into the swimming pool below, and the main entrance to the building. And then we came in connection to Mr. Gerkan by the work of Leon Gerkan. Gerkan was a client from Gerkan, and we came together. And he has bought this Villa Marta. That was the only house he had at the very beginning. And he asked us to enlarge this a little bit. A little bit, he said. At least it was, I said it already, Krasovitsky village that came out. It was more than 10 buildings altogether. I show you now. This is Leon's, and this is Mr. Gerkan's, and this is his very good wife, the opera singer, very famous, and we had a meeting at any time. What you see here is a bird view to the situation of the Riga Bay, the Baltic Sea, and the first extension of the Villa Marta, which is located here, that is the Villa Marta, was that one. It is, let me say, 4 or 5 times larger than the Villa Marta itself. But it was only the beginning. Now we have a site plan. Here, oh sorry. This is the Villa Marta. This was the first extension. And what came later was this building, all these buildings, that one, and all these. I show you one after another. But first I will come to the character. Mr. Krasovitsky was not deeply interested in the kind of architecture. He was missing our meetings. It was only his wife discussing with us. But he agreed. He said, it's okay, it's okay, it's okay. Okay. And once upon a day, 1 year later, he asked me, can we go to the site? I would have an impression of what you do there. We went there, and then he said, as we entered a piece of land, oh, where's a villa? I asked for a villa, not for a horse garage. That's unbelievable. He was so disappointed and angry. But he agreed to, and said, so I'll see what I will do with it later on, I don't know, but I will never live in there. That is a section of it. I go through. It is totally constructed out of wood. Site visiting, discussion, the structure of the material, only wood, and these panels of metal. Interior courtyards with a small pool, with a spring. That is a dining room. This is a conference room. And here he had inside of this house a concert hall and an exhibition hall for paintings. And second floor with a staircase going up to the living rooms, to the guest rooms, and. All these things are done in a way to transform, as I said before, that what had happened 100 years before with the other wooden houses. There's a sleeping room with a window on the top of the roof. And the house got finished, and in the meanwhile he was, because so many people were very impressed by it and said, oh, you have a very extraordinary house, and he was so proud of it that he invited more than 100 Jewish friends from New York, and he chartered a flight from New York for the party, for the opening party. He enjoyed a cooker from Florence, and at least he asked me to be part in this event. There I'm sitting with my wife and my son, who is already this height in the meanwhile, and at least who is sitting here? Somebody knows? That is Gina Loro Brigida. You know her? By name? She was a friend of his wife. She came by a separate flight even from New York, and he took with her a white She didn't drive the car. It was put in the front of the hotel. What's that name? The room. Hotel the room on this place. It was the white. She never used the car. He brought it back to New York later. So that's a way how people who didn't know what to do with their money to use their time. I have never seen things like this. But it continued because Mr. Krasovitsky was, in the meanwhile, so happy with this environment that we realized one part after the other. This is a part where the concerts took place, and I make a small speech there. This is a cooker I mentioned before. He is very famous until now. And we continued to build the village. And in each of these houses are separate functions. I don't need to explain them. This is only the that is Riga. That's not America. Here. Here are all the Rolls Royces. He didn't go out with the Rolls Royce to the city because he was a little bit anxious. I will not mention all what is in here, a swimming pool and facilities. There is sauna, swimming pool, again. All from the finest, but I don't know what happened today, if there is somebody living in or not. This is only for training him. You have seen this small gentleman before. I don't know what he did on these machines. They look a little bit aggressive. So, this is the entrance to the other part. There is a Villa Mata again. And what he needed least was a tennis hall. But because the height of a tennis hall, the inside height, needs 9 meters, and that is too high for the two-story surroundings. So we, oh, it's better though. So we depth it 2 meters into the earth. You can see here. Brought the roof down so it looks much more familiar with the neighborhood. And you come in 2 meters above the ground level. The daylight is coming from the roof. I don't know how many hours they play tennis in there in the 10 years, the past. Nobody told me, but I have been told that there happened a concert even several years ago. But not enough. He had a daughter, and he wished to spend her daughter also a special house next door, and asked us to design it a little bit different, but in the same character. And that is this arrangement. It has even more than 1,000 square meters using space, with a tea garden, tea house in the garden. What a Japanese garden. Yeah, that came out from what Leon Siakrens and we did together in an unbelievable situation, because I couldn't realize that those situations happened in the eastern part of Europe until I met some people in Moscow. That was much more exciting than here. Now at least I show you 3 projects and then I'm finished. 3 which are not being realized. You know, this bank building I have shown you, and this piece of land just to the Daugava, but to the north, but viewed to the river, we designed an apartment which was complete, already planned and could be realized when the difficult commercial situation took place here in the Baltic states, and it has been realized until today. But it could still be built in this exciting situation between the river and the old town from Riga. I don't know if this was a situation we shake hands at that place, but at that time we had sometimes discussions between each other, Mr. Dambis. Another project which was very ambitious is even to the river. Oh, sorry. It went through different hands. Even it was owned by the bank, and later on by a Belarusian. Wie nennt man das? Wie nennt man die Reichen? Ja, ein Oligarch. But even this project was stopped by the financial crisis 4 years ago, I think. It should have a high-rise apartment house here. With their own boat place in front. And this is a little bit outside of Riga, in the north part. There is a wonderful land here for holiday houses. And we made a project like these small houses, but you can see it is also from a long time ago, 14 years ago, and it has been realized. Only small houses for a weekend or so. Now at least I show you one project which I'm especially proud of it because it is the smallest of all. The smallest of all, and it is a present, not the house, but the design. It's a present to Gunnar. Gunnar is a companion from Leon's Jachens, and near to their huge apartment house, they found a very, very small piece of land with many trees on it, and she wished to have there is the apartment house, and that is the other place where we realized this small one-family house. And I was totally independent on that what I designed. I couldn't decide by myself. There was no discussion between us, nothing. And you realized it exactly as it was drawn. That is the huge apartment house, and that is a small one, the one-family house. Yeah. The configuration has to do with all the trees which stands around and had to be respected. The house inside is, the floors are connected by ramps, and this is an outlook. Sorry, so difficult. This is an outlook here. From here you can look over the beams to the open sea. That is Gunnar. She was, to her I presented this design, and they realized it. And we had also a party there, a very unexpected party, because it was at the day when the foreign minister from Germany, Mr. Steinmeier, was in Riga for state office event, and I asked him to come with me at night time to this house, and we gave a concert, and we drink red wine from the bottle, because we don't find any glasses, but they had wine already there. No, that's wrong. Sorry. I mustn't comment it. This configuration expresses itself. You can see how high the trees are. Enormous, more than 30 meters height. This is the viewpoint. It's difficult to look through the trees and into the nature in the neighborhood. Here you see the ramps. And I could say that this project of ours, we have, of our office, von Gerkan Mark and Partner, we have realized all over the world 380 different projects. Even huge projects as a museum in Beijing, the largest museum of the world. This project is published most all over the world. In every country, in every magazine, in America, in Asia, everywhere. So it is very, very famous. The kitchen, staircase, living room. There's Mr. Steinmeier at night time without wine. View into the harbor, the pool in the underground level, and Mr. Steinmeier said goodbye. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Professor Gerkan, for such a tour de force of your involvement with Riga and your architecture, which has shed new lights on it for all of us, I think. But I think we must move on quickly now to Alexandra Warr from English Heritage, who is standing in place of John McCaslin, and she's going to talk about King's Cross in the context of managing change. Alex.
Thank you. Okay, before I begin, I want to emphasize 3 points. The first is, as Christopher has just mentioned, I am not John McCaslin. I'm sorry. As a result, my intervention is going to be a little different. It's not going to be a straight case study, which is the sort of thing that John might have presented, but instead, using my experience of 14 years at English Heritage, I want to situate King's Cross within the context of UK approach to heritage-led regeneration. My second point is that we've heard a lot today about the technical elements of conservation, authenticity, restoration, and construction, which I'm going to avoid. The third is that I am the last thing standing between you and a sumptuous dinner. I will be as fast as I possibly can without endangering the interpreter's wrath. I'd like to thank our Latvian hosts for bringing us together today and for asking me to think about this interaction between heritage, contemporary architecture, and design. Or, as it became for me, a 48-hour adventure in search of the magic formula. I will come back to this idea. But first, I want to start with a joke. And I was reminded about this yesterday. It goes something like this. How many conservation officers does it take to change a light bulb? Change? So, good, thank you, thank you. So 30 years ago, as far as anyone was concerned, a historic building was a historic building. Contemporary architecture was, well, contemporary architecture. The relationship between the heritage sector and architects, owners, or developers was tense at best. So, if, horror of horrors, a modern intervention had to be considered, the results tended to be generally pretty underwhelming. But somehow, in the intervening years, there's been a rapprochement. And today, the heritage values of the site are not just taken into consideration, they are actually invited into consideration. And these are just some of the results that we count as successes. This is Princess Hay in the city centre of Exeter. It was a £225 million redevelopment of a post-war shopping complex, and by all accounts, a challenging project. The initial plans showed little sensitivity to the historic county town. In the end, we worked with developers, the council, and 3 different architectural practices to find an alternative. The project involved removing and replacing a number of post-war structures and introducing residential as well as business and leisure use. The result is that the development has been acclaimed for its design and hailed as an economic success. The area is far busier than before the redevelopment, and the scheme is predicted to create 1,500 new jobs in an area that was in desperate need for them. Moving north rapidly. This is Park Hill in Sheffield, which was considered the most ambitious inner-city housing scheme of its day. Dominating the skyline with its scale and groundbreaking streets in the sky, which you can probably just about see in the bottom left, this site was a Grade 2 star-listed building, but by 1997, it was considered a crime-ridden eyesore. Sheffield City County Council saw the listing as an opportunity to tackle the problems of the site. It invited English Heritage to help explore options for its reinvention. We provided the expert advice on the scope for change and identified the heritage values of the complex. These lay not only in the site's history, but in the scale and vision of the original council housing scheme, in the expressed reinforced concrete frame and the relationship of the building to the landscape in which it sits. Substantial changes to the internal layout and the infill panels within the frame could therefore be introduced without damaging the historic significance. The Park Hill redevelopment is not yet complete, but it's won multiple awards and residents started moving in 2013. In fact, after the first open day, developers managed to sell £1 million worth of apartment space in 2 weeks. It's almost unheard of. In the words of the building's original architect, Ivor Smith, Park Hill has not just been repaired, it's been reinvented. It's wonderful. Something different now. This is Blencow Hall in the Lake District. It's a Grade 1 listed and designated scheduled ancient monument. This means it's at the highest level of protection. Over the centuries, this fortified manor house acquired 2 defensive peel towers, of which one remained habitable, and the one to the south had fallen into total ruin. No floors, open to the elements, with fireplaces visible up the walls. In addition, there was a huge gash in the side of the building, which you can probably see on the left-hand side, which legend would say was the result of an attack by parliamentary forces in the 1640s. But it was probably more about the soft ground, but for romantic reasons, we'll stick with the roguish parliamentary forces story. Either way, when the new owners acquired the property, they wanted to make the entire site habitable and add holiday accommodation. You can just imagine the challenge. Once upon a time, this would have been considered unthinkable. Conservation professionals and local authority planners would have drawn back at the very idea. But thinking has changed. And English heritage archaeologists and building experts worked closely with the owner to develop the right intervention that would not impact on the significance of the historic fabric and put this complex medieval building back into use. The local council supported the principle, which, in combination, gave the owner and the architect the confidence to make a bold proposal. The result is that the gash has been retained and remains as dramatic as ever, with inset glazing and balconies. Inside, there are new rooms and new floors which actually relate to the abandoned fireplaces. This, again, is a multi-award-winning project and remains popular and therefore economically successful destination. But in my own role at English Heritage, I've had the privilege of also seeing many other successful regeneration projects, both in England and across the world, many of which we've actually seen here today. I've seen prisons transformed into luxury hotels or youth hostels. I've seen abandoned and deconsecrated churches put into secular use as trendy restaurant bars, apartments, and in one case, as a nightclub. I must admit, I personally find that challenging, but it's in use. But now we come to the cream of the crop. One of the most important and complex regeneration projects in London, and one of the largest in Europe. The redevelopment of 53 acres, or 93,000 square meters in European, of former railway lands at King's Cross, which created over 26,000 jobs. Just to give you an idea of the scale and complexity of the site, I don't know, yes, you can see, sorry. This includes part of a conservation area, 20 historic buildings, and 2 of the greatest monuments to the Victorian age of railway building, St Pancras and King's Cross, one of which, King's Cross, had to remain in constant use throughout the works. The site ranges in chronological order from the goods yard at the very north of the canal, and then you get the granary. I don't know if you can see this. Maybe I can get the pointer to work. Is that right? Okay. So the granary here, this is the very north, the granary, the stacks down here, all right? Then we get down past the granary, coal drops, goods buildings. Here is King's Cross, which is the Cubit building, and across here, this is the shed, and here is Gilbert's Hotel. The Midland, which is the hotel with the Victoriana front, closed in 1935. It never worked. By the 1950s, rail traffic to St Pancras had dwindled to almost nothing. And by the 1970s, King's Cross was struggling. And the temporary concourse, which remained for 40 years, was built obscuring Cubit's double-barreled voltage shed. So this is the 1970s edition. But to really understand this complex site and just how remarkable it is, you also have to understand the sequence of events that led to its regeneration. The first big thing to happen was that in August 1967, there was a proposal to mesh the 2 stations together, which would have left only fragments of the original buildings. By December 1967, the 2 stations were listed at Grade 1. You could do that kind of thing in those days. But the big catalyst for the site was the decision in 1987, to use King's Cross site as the terminus for the Channel Tunnel rail link. This was always the plan. Waterloo was always the interim. But it's not always clear what the terminus might look like or where it might be because of the longer international trains. So the original idea, which is illustrated here, was to have a terminus in between these 2 buildings, existing buildings, which essentially would have demolished 150 buildings across 17 acres of land to the east and south of the site because it required a massive tunnel. And this was an expensive undertaking. So in 1991, Arup proposed a realigned route coming in from the east via Stratford, which would be less destructive and suddenly put St Pancras to the fore. By 2007, Foster and Arups, in close collaboration with English Heritage and the local authority, completed the scheme for the current St Pancras station, which has been met with great success. In tandem, the area adjacent to King's Cross to the east was being redeveloped and now is a hub of funky bars, cafes and shops. Then came the successful Olympic bid for London, 2012. Whilst Network Rail was already thinking about upgrading the stations, the London Olympics, which also released additional funding, provided the perfect driver for King's Cross redevelopment. With John McCaslin and partners as lead architect and master planner, King's Cross was transformed, literally under our eyes. The station remained open during the whole of the works. And it was transformed into an iconic example of 21st century transport architecture. So this series of photographs will show first the main train shed before conservation works. There was reglazing, refurbishment of the platform, recladding of the roof, which added photovoltaics. You can see those in the middle. Those now provide 10% of the energy for now used at King's Cross. Cubit's frontage has been reinstated, and the temporary concourse has been removed. And they even managed to reinstate the original ticket hall in use as a ticket hall. And then we come to the John McCaslin concourse structure to the west of the building. This is it during works. There were literally people still going to their trains, and that was the finished result. It is a remarkable example of contemporary approach to regeneration in London. It is an extremely dramatic addition. John McCaslin have said, as a practice, we believe in celebrating the best of the past whilst designing high-quality contemporary architecture that embraces the future. This is a dramatic addition to the capital's public realm, and the refurbished building is a source of civic pride for all those passing through this great station. Or, as Cameron put it, this morning as I speak, the new concourse at King's Cross Station is welcoming its first passengers. More proof that when we set out the vision, find the funding, and maintain the drive, Britain can get it right. So maybe that's the magic formula. But the real question is, what makes these projects successful? And what do we mean by success? Is it simply about having an important historic site coupled with good contemporary architecture? Sadly, the answer is no. This is the Tobacco Dock in Wapping in East London. It's a Grade 1 listed warehouse, originally designed in 1805 by the Scottish architect John Rennie, who's also known for his works in Liverpool and Dublin, and most famously as the architect of the original London Bridge, now in Arizona. The Tobacco Dock was a bonded warehouse, unsurprisingly used to store imported tea or tobacco. But progressive closure from the 1960s onwards, with modern container ships opting for deep-water harbours downstream, led to the eventual decline and abandonment of the whole Docklands area. 6,000 acres of forgotten wasteland was how Michael Heseltine, the then Secretary of State for the Environment, described it. The Tobacco Dock regeneration plan seemed like a sure thing. Prime, derelict real estate at the heart of the Docklands boom, which saw Canary Wharf, which now has 2.1 million square metres of office space, at the global headquarters of the two largest banks, HSBC and Barclays. That was on the east of this. And then you've got Fleet Street on Thames, which was Murdoch's new headquarters for News International, emerging just to the west. They had even signed on a signature architect, Terry Farrell, who has just finished his successful regeneration of Charing Cross Station. The project was dubbed the Covent Garden of the East End. What could possibly go wrong? All the best shops of the day were there, the bars, restaurants, cafes, but nobody came. By 2001, there were only 2 businesses left, both eateries catering solely to the journalists of the neighbouring News International headquarters. By 2008, the last business finally folded, and the whole site remained vacant for 4 years, in perfect condition, still being cleaned and maintained, but like a strange ghost shopping centre from an American B-movie. So what happened? What made King's Cross a successful regeneration project, but the Tobacco Dock a total failure? And this, finally, is where I get to the magic formula. Okay, I'll be honest, there isn't actually a magic formula, but there might be. We're actually working on it. And we hope to have a sort of complex model, which I believe only our economist is going to be able to interpret, but which should be able to predict success or failure. But until the magical model comes into being, we'll have to stick with my magical formula, but non-existent formula. But the truth is that I don't have to have a formula because I have most of the elements. I'm just missing the X. If we try and analyze successful regeneration projects, we get several key components which are fairly obvious. The first is historic fabric. Essential in this case because we're talking about historic environment-led regeneration rather than straight development. But even in straight development, we know that people want to live and work in historic places. Our annual social and economic research report has shown that 87% of people agree that better buildings and public spaces improves quality of life. And while 69% believe that heritage sites are important to the local community, a remarkable 92% of respondents to a survey believe that their local project raised pride in the area. In addition, there's a clear economic driver for heritage-led regeneration, such as £1 invested in the historic environment will generate a further 1.6 in the local economy. And there are lots of graphs to prove it. But we also have to understand our own historic assets, which parts are significant and which parts are less so. Through a series of internal sectoral debates, we attempted to rationalize and explain how we came to decisions in conservation in England, which up until then had been completely obscured. After several years of heated debate, we finally came up with conservation principles in 2008. This was a key factor in shifting external perceptions and rationalizing our internal decision-making. So it seems that having well-conserved and understood historic element is our A. So maybe the second one is having sensitive, high-quality design. Another key component of success seems to be good quality modern intervention. This is much trickier because it's more subjective and it's also so far outside my own expertise I can't comment. But what I do believe is that in recent years we have a more educated, more confident decision-maker within the local authorities, who are those who are approving planning decisions for our Grade 2 and listed buildings and conservation areas, and also within our own sector, so those responsible for decisions on the higher grades of listing. Sadly, this is not yet universal, and we've still got a lot of work to do. But the examples which you've seen today demonstrate that we're working our way towards it. We do seem to be moving away from the conservation officer panicking about the idea of change to one who's positively embracing it. The gradual increase in good examples of daring but appropriate regeneration projects has helped us to move from simply saying no because it's safe to mediating between the various actors and interests while preserving the significant elements of the site. I have a wonderful example where one of our inspectors who spent years working on a particular project with a very well-known architect who was particularly stubborn about having things his way. So anytime we would go, well, actually, we really want to keep this, it's rather old, he would say, no, but what, why do people always want to keep the old stuff? By the end of the project, he was calling us and saying, you know what, the builders have just uncovered this historic fireplace, and actually I really want to keep it. So can you fight with the developers because they want to stick to the original plan? I count this as a major success. But the examples that really shine are those where the developers and the architects have taken a more holistic view of the site, encompassing not just the buildings but also the immediate surroundings, such as at King's Cross. Despite multiple owners, developers and stakeholders, the common areas at King's Cross have been developed and designed in collaboration so that one part moves seamlessly into the next in a way that feels almost organic. But it helps immeasurably it helps measurably that our new national planning policy framework from 2012 actually recognizes it. What it says here is that local planning authorities should look for opportunities for new development within conservation areas and World Heritage Sites and within the setting of heritage assets to enhance or better reveal their significance. So it seems that sensitive, high-quality design would be our B. The third one is economic viability. The project needs to have an economically viable purpose, What the tobacco dock story showed me was that whilst you can build it, they won't necessarily come. What hadn't been taken into account was that the geography of the surrounding area meant that pedestrians simply could not access the site without crossing a major road. The second was that people don't drive in the docklands. The car park is empty. And in addition to which, it's marooned in between two relatively vibrant areas in a no man's land. So, on paper, the tobacco dock project was a fantastic idea, but in situ, not so great. And so, to the elusive X of my magic formula. I've alluded to it, but I believe that X is actually about having a favourable policy framework, which gives decision makers, heritage professionals, and architects, developers, and owners the confidence to be more informed, more holistic, and more adventurous. We do still have some work to do, but perhaps in the future, when they ask about conservation officers and light bulbs, the answer can simply be one. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Alex. Magic formula goes really with platform 9.5, which you can actually see the entrance blank wall to on King's Cross Station. Can I thank both our speakers for their contributions this afternoon. Given the time, I don't think we have any time now for questions or discussion, and I have, if I can read it, I have some closing notices which I was instructed to give. If anybody has not yet got a copy of the draft decision recommendations, which we'll be discussing tomorrow afternoon, there are copies at the back, and you can also get them off the conference website, which is www.heritageriga2015.lv. And if any of you want some homework to do tonight, please read it, and if you have any comments or suggestions, please give them to the registration desk outside by the first session tomorrow morning, because then they can be taken into account when we go through the draft tomorrow afternoon. That's the homework bit for tonight. Now for the bit about enjoying yourselves tonight. The buses leave at 6:45 from the Albert Hotel. You need to be there to get on the bus at 6:45. If you don't know where the Albert Hotel is, our colleagues here will lead you, and besides, most of us will be going back there anyhow, and can probably remember how to get home. So that's the next thing, how to get the bus to go to dinner. And finally, if you need a transfer to the airport for a flight either tomorrow or a Saturday morning, please can you talk to the registration desk tomorrow morning probably to sort out what time your transport will be leaving. And finally, if you have any queries, please use the registration desk. And thank you all. I have said everything I've been told to say. You can see my strings being pulled from up there. Have a good evening, and I look forward to seeing you all tomorrow. Thank you. And thank you to our speakers.